Good morning and welcome to the September edition of the National At-Home Dad Network's Dad X Discussions. I want to thank everybody who's joining us live today, as well as everybody who plans on watching this on the replay. Today, we have a very interesting guest. Today, we have Will Ettante. Will is a musician and a dad, and again, he's in the trenches right there with the rest of us. And Will found a way to take kind of the everyday struggles and joys and victories that we have as parents and as dads and channeled it into his own creativity to create something new that he's sharing out there with the world. And, he reached out to us and said that he'd love to speak to our community. And without further ado, I'm going to bring Will on. So, hey, Will, good morning or
Hey,
good afternoon, depending on where you guys are.
thanks for having me. Good to see you.
Oh, thanks for being here. So let's get a little bit of a background. Obviously you're a dad. So, what's your family like? I
Yeah,
mean, you got multiple kids, the one kid. Where are we sitting?
yeah. So we're sitting at two kids now, two boys, and they are 2 and 4. So we're
Ooh,
in the full blown toddler phase in many ways. But both of them are in school. School, little kind of preschool stuff. And so, that takes up a bunch of their time, and they're sort of crossing those thresholds that, I'm sure a lot of guys are familiar with, where they're loving being out of the house, and out in the world with their friends more and more, which is pretty awesome to see. So, but yeah, two boys.
okay. And again, obviously, now you were working as a professional musician at the point that your kids were born, or was this like a
Not, yeah,
side
I
gig?
know. So yeah, so my kind of path has been an interesting one, and kind of not the way that most musicians end up being musicians, I think. But I'd always played music my entire life very seriously. Played in a bunch of bands when I lived in Austin for a while, and obviously in college, high school, always was playing music, but it was always on the back burner to the side. And I actually went to business school and had a whole separate career. So I had a 10 plus year career doing basically industrial and energy finance stuff. So it was like
Oh,
an
okay.
investor doing. I did venture capital for the last few years. I worked running some companies that did, worked in the water space and energy, and kind of ugly, unsexy industries that I was obsessed with, like mining and oil and gas, and all of these industries that we all rely on. So I had a whole separate career, and we had two kids, and really, again, music was a hobby, but had a sort of, as I think can happen, there's kind of this couple decades of life where you go through a bunch of sort of crucible experiences, right? Like having kids, parents getting older, losing folks, and I think for certain people it happens at different times of life, and for us, basically all of those things converged really quickly in one kind of 1 year period, basically, where we had we lost multiple of my family members. We
Oh,
had
I'm sorry to hear that.
1 year old at home, renovating a house, just like kind of one of those perfect storms that when we would describe it to people, it was hard for them to even believe. It's hard for us to believe that it was all happening at once. And then had our second kid kind of coming out of that. And it really, we can talk about this more, but, and I'm sure a lot of folks have had experiences with grief, or just with, the parenthood is like this too, right? Where it fundamentally changes your brain chemistry, I think. And
Absolutely.
so coming out of that is when really I sort of had it's a little bit of a stereotype, right? But I had a little bit of a wake up call of like, what am I really? It wasn't that I didn't love a lot of things about what I was doing before, but there was this part of me that was like, sort of on the back burner. And once, I thought, oh, I'm going to take some time just to, work on an album of some material that I have that that I've been developing, and I can talk a little bit about that. But then once that spigot was opened, it's not closed yet. And I think, it works for me to pursue this now. And so I've been doing it for only about a year full time, but built on the back of, 20 plus years of being a musician before that. But the being a dad really provided an incredible amount of fodder for songwriting, and which is something that, I think I was doing sort of compulsively for a long time, and now it's become, it's taken on a whole life of its own, which is really fun to kind of lean into. But it was something that, I grew up in a musical household. I can't help but sort of make up stupid jingles about everything, and so those now have kind of morphed into a whole second or whatever chapter of my career and my life. So that's sort of a longer story, but it's a path that I think has really helped me appreciate, some of the really hard things that I went through, because I don't think I would be doing what I'm doing now and be as aligned with, what I'm doing if I hadn't gone through that stuff.
Oh, absolutely. And again, I would like to point out, I totally feel where you're coming from. When back in the Stone Age, when I was in college, which again, without outing myself as being too old, I graduated high school in 1990. I went to college majoring in music and theater, or as my father put it, hunger and starvation. And which, then I ended up moving into the food industry for a living. And again, when my daughter was born late in life at 42, that was when I found my passion, which honestly has been being a dad. And doing, embracing that role in my life. Now it took a little while, but eventually I realized that one of the weird things that happens when you become a parent is that not only does your brain change and your life change and everything else, but there's always this feeling of almost a loss of identity, because suddenly, and again, your kids are 2 and 4, you said. Mine at this point are 11 and 8.
Yep.
And the number of people on this planet who know me as Matt is significantly lower than the number of people who know me as Lily's dad or Patrick's dad.
Mm.
And you start having that moment where you start thinking, well, who am I anymore?
Yeah.
Am I just this, is the point in my life now that I am someone's husband, I am someone's father.
Yeah.
And we have to find ways to reach out and redefine who we are and what we're doing. And I found a little bit of that both through my work with the National At-Home Dad Network. Later in life, of all things, I took up triathlon at 49 years old, which I'm very, very bad. Yeah, I say I'm very, very bad at, but I do enjoy doing it and being very much in the back of the pack.
Yeah.
But finding that identity, it was really life-saving to me and made a huge difference in my life. And I'm wondering, you've got kids who are 2 and 4. I remember those years. I mean, that you are in the trenches. They're there all the time, and they're constantly in need. Mine have grown to a point where, I can get them, they go to school during the day, but even when they're home, I've got times where, they're self-sufficient for the most part.
Yeah.
How are you finding a way to balance like your parenthood with a creative endeavor that is honestly this big? Because this isn't a small commitment.
Yeah, for sure. So I think, there's a few things. I certainly hear you, and the conversation about loss of identity and all of that, I think, is really interesting, and sort of the parallels between between as you grow older, between kind of grief, losing people, having kids, and what that does for your sense of control and your sense of, ownership, and, and then that impacts self-esteem. There's a whole bunch of different stuff that goes along with that. So that's a longer conversation, but I think we are in a position where even before I made this transition, I had a more flexible schedule. And so that part of it didn't feel as jarring to sort of, transition away from a sort of quote unquote corporate job. My wife works at a big company, and she has a much more kind of regular schedule. But I think the big thing, and we have help. I'm not full time, only exclusively parenting them, but I am the primary parent. And I think the big thing for me is sort of, or that I've been trying to be really conscious of, is not letting the parenting time push out the things that are really important for me to be a healthy, happy, productive person and a good model for them and everything else. Because I think if you're taking care of yourself, you're a better model for your kids. Because I think what can happen is people, parenting will expand to fill whatever space. It's like a gas. It'll expand to fill whatever space it has. And so if what you push out with that is, like, if I pushed out my music, or I pushed out my exercise, or I pushed out, other stuff, and didn't let it push out, like doom scrolling, like, right. It's like I if I can, it's harder in the evening to have the discipline to go, sit in a nice quiet room and get out my keyboard and work on music, instead of pulling out a computer and looking at a screen, which would be the other thing that I could do in that time. But if I can do that some of the time, and, not beat myself up when I, need to just veg, because, like, we all need to just veg. But I think like that has been a helpful thing to me, is try to, think about what that time is displacing, because the amount of time, you're right. I mean, there's just no limit to the amount of time that will be asked of you. But I also think that to go back to the point, like, in your things like doing triathlons, or, I love to go backpacking and I grew up in Colorado. I grew up outside, and our boys love being outside too, but getting to do those trips, which, on the surface, they feel selfish, right? And honestly, this entire endeavor of music on some level to me feels selfish, which I'll get into in a minute, which is an interesting kind of reflection. It may feel selfish, but what it's doing is it's really establishing a real sense of kind of calm and purpose for me, and that identity that you're talking about, that then means I'm going to show up better for my kids. So I do think that I'm definitely a better parent and a better dad, because I do the things that I need to do, and because I for myself. And I think in particular, creativity is something that without going down the whole philosophical rabbit hole of, like, does art have value, which I know you will agree it does. And absolutely. I think it has immense value, and I think the value of it is only growing as machines can make art. I think the value of people doing it is even more valuable than ever. But I think that modeling real kind of left brain, right brain stuff for the kids, involving them in creativity, channeling, showing them that frustration can get channeled into humor, and that exhaustion can get channeled into great music or great art, or maybe it's not great, but I like it. And I think that, that can be really powerful role modeling as well. And, maybe this is just what I tell myself to feel good about doing what I'm doing. But I do think that when you can see in yourself what, like, I grew up in a family that really valued music and art and literature and whatever else. And I think I can see the benefits that conferred onto me. And so that's a little bit of how I think about it, is like, it's not sure, the time is tough, and balancing that is its own whole thing. but I take a lot of solace in feeling like, you know, the having a work ethic and having boundaries that structure my own, that protect my own time and my own needs, and having healthy relationships with my own thriving social, network, and doing what I need to do to make sure that's true. Those are all things that I want to model for our kids as well. I don't want to model withdrawal. I don't want to model shutting down, and I want to model being able to talk about it when you're struggling as well, because that's a thing that I think men struggle with, and increasingly I think a lot of young men are really, really struggling with. So
well, again, within the National At-Home Dad Network, we've got a very, very strong focus on mental health. There's an amazing group called Dad's Gotta Talk that we partner with. They actually do I think it's three peer support meetings per week for dads to come in and just, bolster everybody up. And one of the things that we always stress, again, over the years that I've been involved with the network, and you hit the nail on the head, is that we all have to take care of ourselves. As at-home dads, and you certainly qualify as one, as the primary caregiver for your kids. As at-home dads, we spend so much of our energy taking care of others, whether it's setting appointments, bandaging up, band-aiding that bruised knee, hugging somebody when they're in that time of crisis. We dedicate so much energy to that, but the reality is unless you take care of yourself, you don't have the energy to take care of other people.
Yep.
And that self-care is going to look different for everybody. For me, it might involve going for a run or hopping on my bike and going and pedaling for 40 or 50 miles.
Yep.
For somebody else, it might involve sitting down quietly and reading a book, meditating, or like you said, writing music. Which, again, coming back to the topic of music, I have a couple of questions. Now, I've gotten to listen to a few of your songs, so I already know the answer to this, but the folks watching haven't.
Yeah.
A lot of times when you talk about people that are, making music about parenting or about kids, the question comes up, okay, is this music for me or is this music for my kid?
Yeah.
Because those are two very, very different things. I mean, we've all gotten into the car after the kid gets out and cranked it up and suddenly had like the soundtrack to Frozen blast our ears out at top volume and think, this is my life now.
Yeah.
Or
you get your kid in the car and you crank it up and it's like a black metal band. And that I always love that because I don't change it right away. I wait and see how they react. I love that. I love the question. No.
I will neither confirm nor deny the fact that at one point in his life, my son's favorite bands included Faith No More and Drowning Pool.
Love it. Yeah. I had a day, just as a funny aside, I had a day when our 2-year-old, he was probably even younger than 2 at the time. It was one of those where you get in the car. We just dropped off his brother at school. We get in the car, and he won't get in his car seat. The thing that can the incessant just battle over, I don't want to get in the car seat. And I told him, I was like, okay, so here's the deal then. You can come sit in the front seat next to me, but we're gonna listen to this metal song that I'm really excited about. And he sat there and he loved it. It was hilarious. He was just like in it. And it was like, it became a thing that we were doing together. So he loved that. And then of course you then get the, let the storm cloud pass of like, I'm just holding on to this, I'm going to say no really hard thing that he's doing.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, that's a different thing, but.
Yeah. But back to your music. So how do you describe your music?
So first of all, I have two kind of separate projects, and they're for those of you who saw this QR code, if you scan it, you'll see there's links to a couple different Spotify accounts, and they're not just on Spotify, they're everywhere. But so I have music that is guitar music and instrumental guitar stuff, and that is it's a little bit more ambient. It's influenced by a lot of fingerstyle stuff. So that really sits in a different category from the Will Ettante stuff that is is much more kind of pop, and it's funny. It's funny to me. I made it to make myself laugh, and so if other people laugh, then that's great. But and that kind of poppy comedy, some of it's a little more folky, but that tongue-in-cheek stuff really sits at this juncture that you're describing. And I originally made it right. I sing all the songs to our kids, and the sort of the way I describe it is, I'm one of these people who, if I call you on the phone, if you don't answer, your punishment is that I'm going to leave you a voicemail, and the voicemail is going to be a song, and it's probably going to be made up on the spot. And it's probably going to be terrible. It's probably going to be, who knows what direction it'll go in. And so that kind of ethos of like, just make a song in the moment about something ridiculous, it created all of these first songs, and I would sing them to our kids. Some of them were much more explicitly like lullaby kind of type things, but with a twist, and always from the perspective of a parent or from the perspective of a kid, but with a little twist and a wink of like, this, I'm being empathetic, but what is this? That's not, hopefully that's not how my kid's actually viewing the world.
Right.
But I think my goal with the music is to make great music that is really it's not just a gimmick, right? Like, this is what I aspire to, right? I think some of the best artists in this kind of, who do funny music, don't just make like a stand-up comedy joke with some guitar chords under it. I think they really create something different with it. Like Adam Sandler, Tenacious D is famous for this, right? They made like the songs just rock out.
Oh, absolutely.
So I think Bo Burnham's same, just absolute bangers. And so what's been interesting though is that I've played a lot of shows for just adults, and I've played a couple shows with a bunch of kids at them, and the kids love the music too, and they, I think the best kids movies are actually really funny for adults, like Zootopia, Lego Movie. Like these are movies that are good because they're really funny. They have a whole second layer running through them. And so that's kind of the aspiration, is that it's music that you want to play with your kids because it makes you laugh about the experience of parenting. Your kids will laugh. They pick up on the vibes. It's, hopefully they can dance to it a little bit. But it's written from my experience, and my experience is, as a parent looking at, the things that we all go through daily. And I also don't think that this music is going to be limited to just to parenting, but that's the first album of material that I've been recording is definitely in that vein. So.
And is that album available currently, or is that coming soon?
It's coming soon. So there's songs. I'm releasing about a song a month right now, and so there's 2 singles out on all the streaming platforms now, and then more. There's another one coming out in October, November, and then all through the winter, and probably the full album is probably kind of early spring, late winter. But I'm building the catalog and building some momentum with that, and playing shows where I'm performing, a lot of the material, and so that's been great as well. But yeah, there's definitely some stuff out there. And on the instrumental side, I have a lot of music available. So I have a whole album out on that. So that's again, different vein, but I think hopefully people would like it.
Shameless self-interest. When you drop the album, make it available on vinyl for those of us that are all snooty about that kind of thing.
I love it. I actually, nowadays it's getting, it's never been easier to sort of do stuff as an independent artist, but vinyl's made such a big comeback that I will happily do a pressing of some of those. Especially the instrumental stuff. That album's out, so we'll stay tuned. But yes, we'll do.
Yeah, because again, at some point I rediscovered how much. And again, you and I were talking about this before we went live. Again, there's almost a ritual aspect to a lot of the things that we do throughout our day, and listening to music is one of those things. And to me, there's just something purposeful about, taking the album out of the sleeve, putting it on the
Yeah.
turntable, lowering the needle, and just sitting back and enjoying that. I just don't get that when I press play on my phone or an MP3 player.
Yeah.
It's just not that same vibe, so to speak.
No, totally. And I think I had this experience recently with, and I see somebody made the comment that self-care looks different for everyone. I had this moment
Yeah,
where
yeah.
I was packing up my equipment. You can see I have this, like, I don't travel with a ton of stuff. I travel with this pedal board of stuff and a guitar, basically. It's those two things.
Hmm.
And I was packing that up because I had a couple shows out in the Bay Area, so I was getting ready to head out the next day. And I was listening to an audiobook. I was listening to Lonesome Dove, which is this classic it was written in the 80s, but a classic Western novel, very
Hmm.
long. I hadn't read it. I love that genre. Anyway, as an aside, if anybody's looking for a rec of just an incredible book that's a classic that is a Western, I would say to read it. But I was listening to this audiobook and I was packing up my stuff. So I'm just it's physical, right? I'm taking this thing, I'm putting it in the case, I'm curling up the cables, I'm putting them in, I'm, situating. And I had this realization. I was like, this is the Zen quality of this ritual that I'm doing right now is so, like, my blood pressure could not be lower. I mean, well, I guess unless I'm not having a medical issue, but like, I literally could not be more calm, could not be more situated. And I think that's a thing I realized about, I mean, it's more true just with more demands on your time and with parenting, with the hectic nature of it, but is you don't realize how big of an impact a tiny little moment of being physically present in your body, doing something that is kind of for you, but that is just, it pulls you into the present moment in a physical way, I think is so valuable. And I was laughing because I was like, it's so funny to think about, like, packing and organizing equipment as a form of self-care, but I was alone in my office and it was just, and and so I think that's a thing. It's like you realize, who cares if that's just a weird thing that works for you, do it.
Oh, absolutely. And again, Jen hit the nail absolutely on the head with that, about self care looking different for everyone. Um, Now, one of our viewers, Tyler, popped up saying,
Yeah.
being an at home dad, how do you engage in the creative process? Do you write in bursts, or is it a more dedicated process? Because I know Tyler is a
Yeah.
musician as well.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. So I think it's varied. And I think there's different stages, right? There's sort of the what Rick Rubin calls the green shoots part of the process, which is idea generation early. It's nothing is fully formed, but it's like, oh, that could be an interesting idea or a melody or whatever. And I have found that there's periods of time where that just happens for me more than other times. There's other times when you move into the period of taking those ideas and crafting them, or practicing them for performance, or finalizing the nitpicky details of, like, you've recorded something and you're fixing minutia, which scratches a different part of your brain. But there's different phases where different parts of that kind of happen more than others. But I think I found that kind of green shoots part is much more in the moment, in bursts, like you're describing. Like, something will hit you or hit me, and I will just have to get it down. And I joke, I have the first song I released, the first Willitaunt song that I released, is called Kids Menu Overcharge. And
Hmm.
literally, I had a kid in my arm walking from a place where we had just bought chicken tenders, and it hit, and the song hit me, and I had a backpack, I had all the crap. You're carrying a million things, and including, like, a squirming. I was probably like 2.5, I was probably 3 at the time, and I got my phone out and was voice memo recording myself singing it while I'm power walking down the street to the car. And like that's the kind of thing where I've found that just getting ideas, if I have an idea, you just do it. And it's not going to be finished. Who knows how long it'll take to finish it. That song wasn't done till like a year later, probably. But that happens in bursts. And then I think there's other parts where I find that if I can do in the course of a week or in the course of a day, if I can get chunks of time that check certain boxes in my creative process, like time to just actually play guitar, which for me is my instrument, like just to just be in this room. This is my room, you know, be in this room with the volume louder, with just playing it and listening to it and messing around, either practicing or just playing like that. I got to have that time. I've got to have time, you know, again, in the course of a week or whatever, to just do the computer, you know, do stuff that's more computer driven, where it's like, you know, editing a track that I'm working on or something like that. And so it's less like a linear thing where I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do that, then I'm going to do that. And it's not quite so regimented that I'll have like calendars slots blocked off that says like, this is rehearsal time. I've tried that. I personally just kind of blow through those, and it ends up being more fluid. But I can sort of look back on a week and be like, the reason I feel good about this week was that I checked several boxes over the course of a week, and I kind of harnessed the energy that I had at a given time decently well, right? Like you don't always want to do, there's stuff you're not motivated to do. And so, you know, it's like, if you have a little more motivation to do those things at a given time, then like I try to just harness the motivation I have rather than being mad at myself for not having more motivation. And then if I'm on it, if I have energy and something's pulling me, and it's just, then as much as I can before, you know, something pulls me away from it, I just, you know, I'm not going to feel guilty for coming up with 20 stupid song ideas instead, if it's at the expense of something else in my, you know, quote unquote process, if I had energy to do that. So longer answer than maybe you were bargaining for, but that's sort of how it goes.
Again, it's the right answer. I mean, again, we got to take advantage. I mean, I'm assuming you got to take advantage of those creative moments when they happen, as best you can, because as hard as we might try to schedule it, you can't schedule creativity.
I also think there's one other thing that I have found, and sorry to interrupt you, but just, I don't want to lose the idea, the thought.
Oh no, absolutely.
Which is that I think the weird, surprising, sometimes even annoying at the time, interruptions or things that come in when you're trying to do something creative, like, for example, a kid running in and yelling in the middle of your recording something, would be an example. Those little tidbits, this is why I think live performance is so great and so powerful, and why people love to do it and why I love to do it. Those unexpected things end up being really, really valuable. And so like for example, on this song, maybe you guys will hear it, but there are samples of my kid laughing and saying "ready, set, go" and stuff like this.
Which song is this? The Kids Menu Overture?
In the Kids Menu song that's there, but there's another song I'm releasing later that will have this too, where I, you know, because I was recording something and had my phone out, I was doing something, I ended up getting some funny audio of my kid saying "ready, set, go," and because rather than starting recording, you know, I did it then. And now that's in a song, right? So I think that's the other thing, is sort of letting go a little bit of what you thought the process should have been, and letting some of that stuff in. And I'm not saying like you should all make music with your kids or whatever, but I mean, I don't think I do think you'll have fun doing it, and I think it would be important.
Oh yeah.
But it's more just like, you know, a weird sound. Like I was at a park with our kids, and they had these xylophone things, and I just banged around on them, and I was like, man, these have this quality of sound that is just amazing. And so I've recorded some samples on that, and I'm going to go back, and I got to do it when, you know, I have a little bit of time to actually do it. But like, I'm going to record some song stuff at a park because I was there and I found the thing. Right. And then you don't feel like that time is pulling you away from something else that's like more important or something, or that they're mutually exclusive. But I try to, you know, sometimes they obviously are, like, you know, you're not always doing, but I do think that letting the creativity seep in is fun, because it also just makes stuff more, you know, makes it a little more, feel more playful and less like work.
Well, look, I'm going to see if we can actually play that song, and see if we can pull that up real quick and make that go through. So let's give this a shot. Wow, that hits a little too close to home right there.
I couldn't hear it on my end, so I hope you guys could all hear it. But
Yeah, I know I could hear it on my end. But again, if it did not come through, I deeply apologize. But again, once again, if you use the link that we put up earlier, and if you give me a moment, I will pull that up. It does have direct links to several of his songs. Using that QR code that's in the upper left-hand corner that you guys see right there, you will be able to find the information. And again, the very idea of the amount of money made off of kids' menus is obscene, because we all know exactly how much chicken tenders and fries cost, because most of us,
you know, even more than
more
anything,
than we should.
You're coming from the restaurant background. I'm coming from a business background, and so I've had my moments. You're in a very weird headspace when you're looking at a menu and you're thinking, how do I make the restaurant make the least money possible on this meal? You know, and you catch yourself having that thought, and you're like, why? I've lost the plot here. I should just order the chicken nuggets or the chicken tenders and move on with my life, because they still taste great. They always taste too good, but.
Yeah, well, I can say at this point in my life, I've got one child who has moved on from the kids menu. My oldest is my little burgeoning foodie. You know, last night she had seared tuna, rare, sliced, lightly seasoned with a little bit of soy sauce.
Love it.
Whereas my 8-year-old son is still very, very much in his brown and white phase.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, he had his chicken tenders with ketchup and French fries.
Yep.
You know, we made sure that he did have a little bit of fruit every day, because unfortunately, you know, he's in a position where he is only doing one fruit at a time these days.
Mm.
Currently, we're on strawberries. Before that, it was grapes, and then we decided that we didn't like grapes anymore, but not before Dad bought a brand new big bunch of them.
Of course. I was laughing with my wife recently that I think the proudest I've ever felt as a father was watching our kids eat sushi and just housing it, like, just a truly almost alarming amount. But I remember being like, this is such a funny, it's like, obviously I'm proud of them a lot, but I think there's something that strikes a particular calming chord when you see your kids actually eating. And when you realize, when you kind of realize that they are going to turn into, you know, hopefully they're going to turn into to well-rounded people, and not just, you know, hot dogs only. But then you remember you've got your adult friends who still only eat hot dogs and ice cream, and you know, we don't hold it against them. So
Again, I learned a long time ago. I spent 20 years in the restaurant industry, and I can remember being, a young up and coming cook. And, just like the stereotype, that order would come in for the well done steak, and you'd complain and talk about how this person, oh my God, they have no taste and blah, blah, blah. And as you grow as a chef, you begin to realize that, well, no, they do have taste. It's just not the same as mine. And the fact is, if that's what makes them happy, then give it to them and let them be happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think
Totally.
the phrase
Zero
I was
props to
told
you.
once is that, the bankruptcy courts are filled full of restaurants and chefs that wanted to teach people how to eat
Hmm.
as opposed to giving them what they want to eat.
Totally.
Now, but again, we get off topic here. One thing that I did want to bring up is that early on in our conversation, you had talked about how you beginning your fatherhood journey kind of coincided with a lot of loss and grief.
Yeah.
And again, I was in a similar state. I was 42 when my oldest was born, and 4 months after she was born, I lost my dad. And there was a lot going on with that. And again,
Yeah.
having waited until later in life to have kids, when I was growing up, my grandparents, I was in high school before I lost my first grandparent.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I look at my kids and the fact that I was 42 when my oldest was born, I realized that I'm going to be walking them through grief at a much larger and higher level than most parents would expect to.
Yeah.
And that's something that's tough. And I'm curious about, the parallels in your mind between
Yeah.
like parenting and grief and overcoming that.
Yeah. Well, for sure. And I think the more I've talked about what's, as I was going through it and then also after what sort of we went through, I just think that there's a phase of life where I think these things coincide more often for people than I've expected for sure. And then you'd think. And so, I think it's really great on one level to sort of know you feel sort of universally, it's a universally human experience to sort of see these things, maybe not right in such close succession, but yeah, I mean, I think so for us, we had a 1 year old, and then my mom was diagnosed with cancer, and she went through sort of a 7 month process where the forks in the road kind of all went the wrong way, and she passed away in January of a couple years ago of 23, and then we lost my brother in a car accident about a month later, literally the week of her funeral. And then
Oh,
my aunt then lost an aunt who was elderly, but I'm convinced it was a broken heart. So my dad literally lost his wife, his son, and his sister within a month. And 1 year old, my wife's
that's
pregnant with her
rough.
second kid. I mean, it's truly, we were these people in this. It was the amount of cortisol in my brain, the amount of just like overload was so high that it was truly wild.
Oh,
But I think so, and then had to say, had our second kid, then so had a newborn, and sort of the aftermath of all that. And the so I think there was like, my coping mechanisms were very well suited to crisis. If there's a crisis, it's like if there's wood to chop and there's dishes to do and there's admin to handle and things to negotiate with insurance company, like that stuff, and estate, lawyers or whatever the stuff, like you probate, whatever, all these things, like the admin and I call them the grim logistics, that stuff is well suited to my personality. But then after all that's done, and then it's just sitting in it, right? And and you're back to sort of trying to establish a new normal and trying to reestablish momentum. And my, I was working in venture capital at the time, and all of that was really, really hard, much harder. And the thing that I've realized is I think you talked about loss of identity. I think the biggest parallel to me that was driven home during that year, especially, and afterwards, sort of as I've integrated all of it, is that you're losing control fundamentally. You're when you have kids, they are not you. They are separate people. And I know it's a dumb thing to say on one level because it's obvious, but they are separate from you in a way that I think is unique, because you have all this responsibility, but you fundamentally don't have control. And I think and especially for, I'm more of a type A person who wants to, I'm not a control freak, but like maybe my latent OCD kind of came out during these couple of year period. But the feeling of wanting to make things right and to have control and to sort of to create the world you want to create, and the ultimate frustration of not being able to do that is, I think, one of the things that's really hard about being a parent. You don't control your own time as much. You can't control your kids' behavior really. Like, you can influence, you can negotiate, you can set boundaries, but you can't control how they feel. You can't control what they think. You can't control what they say. And I think that is the big thing when you lose somebody, is like it is the ultimate human lack of control, right? It was your own mortality, and you can't bring them back. You can't, as much as you want to do, and try to help, with medical interventions or whatever. Like, there's only so much you can do, and so that parallel really has struck home to me, which is why I think there's sort of a feeling of grief that a lot of people have when they have kids. They're like sort of mourning their past selves, but you're also just losing control. And then I think there's also this physiological thing that happens, which is, the dad brain and grief brain are the same in a lot of ways, which is this feeling that, and I think this isn't rooted in, some science, although I bet people have studied this, but like, my experience of it, at least, is that you have a sort of, it's like the computer of your brain is just some portion of the processing power is just being used even when you're not aware of it, because you're thinking about, there's background processing that's happening, right? Like, you're on some level concerned with your kids. You're concerned with, like the X, Y, or Z logistics that are coming up that maybe you're not thinking about right now, but they're in the back of your head. You're concerned with their well-being. Maybe there's something going on with them. Maybe they're having a health issue or something. And that's, even if you're not thinking about it consciously, it's there. And then same thing, I think the brain research about grief is that your brain is fundamentally trying to rewire itself to reorient with the loss of an object that was very orienting for you, which is this person. Mm-hmm. They serve some role. And so your brain is literally trying to rewire itself. And that's happening whether you're thinking about it actively or not. And so you have a penalty on your cognition and your awareness from that. And I think that which then, you couple that with the feeling of lack of control and impotence and loss of agency and those frustrations. And you're going to take some self-esteem hits, just fundamentally. You're not as sharp. You don't feel as capable. And then you're losing control of stuff that you thought and maybe you were taught, depending on, your life, you were taught you're supposed to be, be the man and who controls things and makes stuff right and fixes stuff and kind of muscles your way through. And so I think there's a real parallel with that. And then, the more I've talked about it, the more I just have found that is a real universal experience for a lot of people. And I think it, ultimately it clears a lot of space for something different. And the perspective that it gives is obviously just solid gold, or can be. And for me, I'm so grateful because it ended up helping me make what was a very hard decision. Like, I left a career that was, that I did love in a lot of ways. I left a firm that I had founded, and helped create. And so I left, it was my baby, and I moved, I made a very hard decision. And I don't think I would have been able to do it had I not spent that time with those kind of perspective and physiologically altering experiences. So I'm super grateful for it in the end, but that's with the benefit of, a little bit of time and space from it. And I just, my heart goes out to people who are in it.
Yeah.
Real.
It's definitely a part of life, whether we want it to be or not.
Yeah.
And it's definitely a tough one. Again, we are coming up on 50 minutes right now, which is usually about where I cap these things off. We've had people coming in and out throughout because like most parents, we've all got things going on. But before we go, I do want to I want to put that QR code up for you guys to get information about Will, get access to his bio, links to his Spotify page, and everything else so that you can hear his music. You can follow him on social media, figure out where are you doing live performances these days?
I'm doing a lot. Yeah. So I did, one of the things that I did this year that was really wonderful was and it's not actually all the way finished, is a living room tour of house shows. And so I've played in about 10 different cities, or maybe even more at this point, and all across North America. And I find that format is really great. It's a differentiated experience. People love the shows in that setting because it's really intimate, but then you can get a decent sized show too. So it's really fun.
Yeah.
So and then I perform at venues as well. And obviously,
and you said
Chicago.
And you said you said you're based out of Chicago, so you're performing in venues that are in the Chicagoland area.
Yeah, and then elsewhere too. So I'm sort of starting to put together plans for what next year will look like in terms of live performance. But am always interested in talking to folks who have avenues where it would be, I'm a one-man show, so I do a lot of looping, and I have both this instrumental stuff that I do and also the Will Ettante stuff, and I can do those in a combined format, or obviously they can be, there's a separate thing as well. But I'll obviously will always post, and I have an email list on that QR code where I announce shows, and where you can also get in touch with me if you'd like to host a show. I'm always looking for hosts for that kind of living room show. And the requirements are not as crazy as people think. It's, it doesn't have to be a giant space or anything. And it's, you can see that this is the sum total of equipment that would be in the house. So it's like, it's not some big production.
Yeah.
But obviously as I play bigger venues too. And so on there, but
we do something similar here. I live in Durham, North Carolina, and I know in the Durham Chapel Hill community, they have a series, and again, I don't know who coordinates it, but they call them front porch concerts.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's largely a lot of American roots music, bluegrass, folk, blues, that type of thing. A lot of it's acoustic. But the idea being, hey, you got a front porch that somebody can set up the band on, and are you willing to let people bring chairs and hang out in your front yard? Sweet, we'll show up.
There you go. Yep.
And it's a really nice community vibe. So I can easily see where the living room concerts that you're doing would fit into the same category.
They are, yeah, and some of them have been outside, by the way, too. It's just, I say living room, but
yeah.
Yeah, playing shows.
And again, you mentioned that you're based out of the Chicagoland area, which gives me the opportunity to point out that coming soon right now, we have Home Dad Con coming up again next year. We just had our convention this month in San Antonio. But we are having it next year. It is going to be our 30th convention. Which is really, honestly, kind of shocking. When I went to my first one in 2016, it was there were already 20 conventions in, and just to see the differences that have happened in the last 10 years is absolutely amazing. But Home Dad Con 2026, which is going to be the 30th Home Dad Con, is going to be in Chicago. We are going to be in downtown Chicago, and the dates for that are going to be October the 1st through the 3rd, with our standard format of our kickoff party of Convention Eve on October 1st, that Thursday night, with then convention content all day on Friday and all day on Saturday. And for those who are interested in finding out more, you can go to our website, which is www.athomedad.org. You can find all kinds of information about the National At Home Dad Network there, about what we're offering and, what we do as far as everything from the Dad X discussions to there's a weekly podcast. There's Dad's Got to Talk mental health support. There's a book club. Heck, there's a group of us nerds that play D&D on Tuesday and Thursday nights online. But mostly it's just an amazing community of dedicated fathers, and the convention itself is exactly what you'd think it would be. It's professional development for professional dads. We've had people come to speak on everything from, let's see, we had Dr. Anna Machin from Oxford University in England, who came to speak in 2019 in Minneapolis, Minnesota, who we are bringing back for the 30th anniversary in Chicago, who is a evolutionary anthropologist who speaks on the psychological and physiological changes that happen in a father's mind when he becomes a dad, which is again fascinating. All the way to this last year, we had Strider from the online or from the social media account Dad Braids come and teach a whole room full of dads how to braid hair for our kids with long hair. And again, I'm now doing fishtail braids for my daughter on a regular basis because she's decided those look awesome. So thank you for that, Strider, if you happen to see this. I want to thank you for your time in coming to join us. Again, I will point out the National At Home Dad Network is a volunteer run and operated organization. Everybody that does everything for us does this as our gift back to the community. Nobody here is paid. If you have an interest in volunteering or helping us out in our mission, you can email our volunteer coordinator, Dale Van Vlera. That's his email up there right now. Again, feel free to go to athomedad.org. Again, the Home Dad Chat podcast you can find on Spotify or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. In the meantime, I'm going to tell everybody to have a really, really great day. Thank you once again, Will, for coming to join us. And I do apologize for adding that final E to your name. It's
no. It's the spelling's right. It's just pronounced Will Ettante, but it's
Will Ettante. I gave you the Ettante. I was guessing it to the best of my ability.
I'm not bothered even a little bit. Don't worry about it. Thanks so much for having me. It was great to talk to you, and I look forward to continuing to stay engaged with you guys.
All right. Well, stay tuned, and we'll release information about who our next guest will be coming in October. In the meantime, everybody have a great day and enjoy yourselves.